Hello and welcome to your weekly Excel tutorial with Dave. Today we're going to talk about variables and naming them. So we have here a list of different variable types and how exactly their storage size and allowable range react. We also have here a couple of rules. Use a letter as the first character. You cannot use special characters like the period, exclamation point, the @ symbol, the ampersand, the $sign, or the pound sign, and you cannot exceed 255 characters in length, and I hope you never plan to. And you cannot use any special names that are already defined as something else, like workbook or a cell, and I'll show you an example of integer. So, moving on to our actual Visual Basic, we have this as our variable call. So first you have to actually provide space, tell it where the variable is, and name your variable. So dim logical result as Boolean. So this can hold true or false, as it says here in the allowable range. Always try to name your variables as something that makes sense in context. So this happens to be an example, so logical result happens to make sense. But if you have this Boolean holding a value of yes or no to a particular field, try naming it more something that particular field rather than just logical result. So moving on to integer, dim whole number as integer. Longs are big whole numbers, so they're actually much larger, as you can see in the table here. And the double has a decimal, so the double itself holds many decimal points, but it can't actually hold large integers. Then finally we go to currency, which has a much larger whole number and gives you several places back in the decimal point area. So in this example it has 4. Then we have the dynamic date. So if you have to have a date in your program, in your subroutine, you can use this date format. It is also it's nice to note that dates are actually just integers, and dates with time happen to be integer and decimal. So you can actually use a double or currency to hold that, and then simply format it when you use the actual number. And then finally we have dim words as string. So these are all just common uses. There's actually things like character, which is giving you one character. It's not usually relevant to use something like that, but you can. This is by no means an exhaustive list. So if I go ahead and hit go, it goes to macro complete. So there are no issues with the way I've called my variables here. But if I try to dim something that actually violates this, so if I try to do number and just num exclamation point as integer, you'll note that it turns red. There's actually a problem here and it's not going to run, so there's a syntax error. And let's go ahead and stop that. So if I change this to just num, it will work. So it changes to as integer, you see the blue highlighting, and that actually tells you that you're correct. What we have here is also the final rule, so don't use special names. So if I try to say integer, it's also going to give me that same problem. So that doesn't mean anything. So inti will work, but integer will not. Another thing to note while you're using your variables is that most of VBA is not case sensitive. You'll notice that if I type dim and then num as integer, I haven't capitalized anything. It's not case sensitive in this case, but when you call a variable, when you actually define the variable itself, it takes note of what case the letters are in. So when you have dim lowercase words, make sure that you call it as lowercase words for the remainder of the time, or else it won't actually capture your variable. Another thing to notice is that when you're calling a variable, it has to start with a letter. So starting with a lowercase word is usually the best, and then if you have more words or abbreviated words, capitalize the first letter of each word so it's a little bit easier to read and so that people can understand what you're trying to say and what you're trying to accomplish. You can also use an underscore because underscores are actually valid characters. You can use the underscore in order to kind of separate the names a little bit. Just to make it easier in the future, that's not actually required. So, if you found this video helpful, please subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and send me a message. I'll get back to you. Thank you.